I will do anything for you and your goals as long as you're being like honest with what you're trying to do. Coach, I'm going to be a medalist next year at the conference meet. Awesome. So are you going to train here this summer? Well, like, I'm not sure I'm going to have enough time to train this summer. I'm like, okay, well, that's okay. But I think we really need to talk about like those type of goals or just re-examine what we're thinking about. You know what I mean? Or like, hey, I want to make a US Open cut this year. Great. What are we going to do this spring? Are you going to do the 8 hours, or are you going to, hey, are you going to do some voluntary workouts so that we make sure that we're building towards that this summer, so that we make sure we get that cut this summer? And I think for young people now, it's just having those conversations and not coming at it from a negative approach of like, if you don't do this, you're bad and you're never going to be successful. It's just more like, hey, and I think that's the things where, kind of going back to Brian a little bit, or other people we've had in the program that have been really successful. It's like, let's have an honest conversation about what it looks like to do the things you want to do.
Take your marks.
Welcome to another episode of the Get Out Swim podcast. I'm your host, Seamus T. Quinn, and today I'm joined by head coach of men's and women's swimming and diving at Towson University. This is Anthony Bruno. So, Anthony, thanks for hopping on.
Yeah, Seamus, thanks for having me. Super excited to be here. So thank you so much.
For sure. Yeah. Well, this is awesome because I just had your star swimmer over at Towson, Brian Benzing, on the pod yesterday. And so he got to kind of take a deep dive with me into NCAA's, the whole experience, walking behind the blocks in an A final of the 100 breast and finishing as the national runner-up, putting Towson on the map there and just kind of going through the season and what's really worked, what's clicked for him at Towson throughout his 4 years, with you at the helm. So it was great. And now I'm excited to get the coach's perspective and also just, take a deep dive into your own journey. So let's start with this. You're off of NCAA's. It's been what, like a couple days since you've been back in Towson, kind of, processing the meet, and I'm sure probably having to switch gears and go back to recruiting mode and yada, yada. But what were just like the initial thoughts coming off of NCs and what Brian was able to achieve and just the meet, as a whole, the experience and everything that went on for Brian and for Towson and at the meet?
Yeah. So, backtracking a little bit. So my second year here, getting to work with Brian, certainly we got to go last year. And that was a great experience. That was my first NCAA's as a head coach, Division I level. And it was a phenomenal experience. But what I would say is, Brian, and he might have even said this the other day, he definitely didn't leave satisfied last year's NCAA meet. He finished wherever he was in the prelims, maybe 12th, I think 14th that night. Had done a best time that year, but, hadn't achieved what he was hoping to achieve at NCAA's. So, one of the things we talked about as a team when I got back, I was like, we could certainly talk a lot about what Brian did. But the overall journey for where it was, like his journey really started when we got back from NCAA's last year. Certainly last year he had a great season overall and dropped a lot of time and broke some conference records, and did all personal best last year. But his journey to achieve at the highest level really started at about this time last year when he came back. In doing different chats with different people, one of the things we talked about with him that he does so good is just there's not a lot of 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds who have the amount of self-discipline that he has. He's really committed. I've used the comment a couple of times of, the guy shows up on December 22nd and, he'll also be there on December 26th, it forces us to be better coaches, right? Because it's like, if this guy is that committed, like we have to match that and exceed that in terms of our level of commitment to them. And we are, I appreciate that, he's trusted me and, I've certainly been hard on him at times, but I think, in working together, we've really been able to achieve some exciting things. I guess the second part of your question, what has he done that makes him so successful? outside of the self-motivation and discipline and just being a great team guy, one thing Brian does really well, and we were talking about this the other day, him and I, is I think the reason his breaststroke has gone the way it has is if you've paid attention to some of his results, he's gotten so good at everything else, right? There's not a lot of guys that go 19.9 flat start, 134 in the 2 free, but also go 142 in the IM, but also go 152 in the 2 breast, but also go 45 or almost go 45 in the 100 fly, I stuck him in the 4 IM this year, which he really didn't want to do. No, I'm just kidding. He was great, but he was a great teammate for that. But as we've trained to do different things, I think it allows, for the right athlete, it allows them to not get so tunnel visioned on one thing, because sometimes, especially with breaststroke, if it's not clicking, I'm a big believer you got to go away and come back, because it's such a wonky stroke. Right? I mean, it's such a wonky stroke. If you don't go away and come back, I think you can just get frustrated. So you, as long as you're doing different things, you can constantly see yourself growing. And I think that's so important, to be able to see growth in your overall swimming, and then go back and focus on the things you need to focus on. If that makes sense.
It was sorry to interrupt you, but it was interesting because we literally talked about this yesterday. I asked him, I know breaststroke's your bread and butter, but is that your favorite event, or do you like swimming the IM and the other strokes? He's like, I can't tell you how much I've loved swimming IM this year. Just figuring out the race strategy, my kicks off the wall, and being able to strategically kind of think about, okay, how am I going to execute this race to go faster? He's like, the 2 IM has become one of my favorite races. And he was the same with the 2 free. He was like, I love training freestyle to nail a 2 free. And so I was like, oh yeah, that's refreshing to hear. I'm sure for other, people that specialize in one stroke, because like you said, you kind of have to take, some space away from constantly doing 100 back or constantly doing 100 breast, style of training and racing, because ultimately, you could reach a burnout really quick, and it's not always mentally the best. And so, yeah, being able to have a range is so exciting as a swimmer.
Oh, for sure. And again, just to reinforce that, yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with the you when you hit the wall and then you're only doing one thing, it's hard to measure, am I still holistically getting better, right? And I think that's the whole part of the journey is am I holistically improving? Because it's amazing when you go to these mid-year meets and stuff like that, and you pick up a 4th event, and somebody's like, oh, I just did the best time for the first time. It's yeah, you're getting better. It's just when you're so fast at certain things, the margins are smaller. So it's okay to, I think, explore and just reinforce that your work is going towards something, right? It's so important, I think, on the mental side of the sport.
Definitely. And what was it like just being at the pinnacle of our kind of sport at NCAA's with Brian, and just seeing the success he was having, kicking it off with 2 IM, hitting that 1 breast, and then to the 2 breast. I mean, it was 3 for 3 incredible swims. Yeah. It's what was that like, just being at that meet, seeing Leon Marchand, all these amazing stuff. You're literally seeing, it's a preview of the Olympics. I'm this is the fastest meet you'll ever see. It
was like a movie. And I mean, I don't know how much he shared or didn't share. It was like a movie. So we were working our way up in terms of our progression to the meet and the different things we got to do. Everybody calls it different stuff. I call it benchmarks, so it's we'll go through our training and we do different benchmarks to kind of indicate where we're at and just reinforce that, hey, we're in a good space. And sometimes, with those benchmarks, it's really the same thing, just repackaged a different way. So it's a little different. So it's don't do exactly the same thing twice in the cycle, but it's essentially the same thing. And it gives you an idea of where you're at. And it was funny because he said in the lead up, he's the week before, he was I don't know. I'm not sure some of those are going as well as he wanted them to go. Because what happened was, I was with the team at the National Invite 2 weeks out from NC2As. So the way the National Invite works is it's combined men and women, National Invite, women's NC2As, men's NC2A. So I was at the National Invite. And Coach Emily was here with Matt, and Matt was with me down at the National Invite. So Coach Emily was here with Brian. So I'm sending her the sets. these are the benchmarks, because like I worked with him all year. So I was like, here's the things he needs to do. Keep it positive, keep it rolling, keep him in a good space. And I'm getting the feedback every night, and I'm calling him at night. He's like, you're calling me at like, I'd be calling him at like 9:30 at night once the team down in Florida was settled. And he's like, but again, credit to him, best teammate in the world, because he's going like, he's commenting on how his teammates are doing down in Florida. And I'm like, yeah, they're killing it. They're doing great. And I was hoping that as we were doing so good in Florida, it would just reinforce like, hey, the team is in a good spot. Overwhelmingly, it's a lot more good. So like, hey, hopefully you are watching. And of course, he's a great teammate, so he's watching it. And I'm like, all right, like these good things are happening. And one of his teammates, actually, Sean Colson, got runner-up down there in the 2 back and like dropped more time. And it's like, hey, I think we're on the last day of the meet down there. I'm like, hey, I think we're in a great spot. We're in a great spot. Like it's moving. Anyway, so I come back. It's the last week. And it's tough because, right, like the season's over and like it's spring break. So it's just me, him, and Emily's coming to practices to kind of keep the continuity. So anyway, in the lead up, we get there. Last day leading up to it. So anyway, we get there. I'm all over the place a little bit with it. You could tell it was a movie. It was.
Yeah,
like
it's good. It's good. Yeah, go through it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, we get there on Monday, and it's it's travel, so it's like okay. One thing we did maybe a little different this year was like, I was very specific with what we wanted in the morning workouts. So I was like, hey, we're gonna do these in the morning, and at night again, like, hey, warm up the way you need to warm up to get ready to race, and we're gonna hit this benchmark. And it was like Monday was okay. Tuesday was really good. Wednesday was good in the morning. And like his last benchmark, we do a 50 off the block in the suit, and it was like electric. And I go, so we're talking about the medley relays that night, right? And I go, well, you've got the second fastest time, or no, at that point, he had the fastest time in the country this year in the 50 breaststroke. So like going into that, like he'd beaten everybody from SECs, Big Tens, you name it. He was technically still ahead of Marshawn at that point, right? For 50 breaststroke split on the year, he'd been 22.5. So I'm like, all right, it's like, and so me, him, and Emily are sitting there, and I go, you're gonna, I was joking. I was like, outside of one guy from France, you're probably gonna have the fastest cut or the fastest time on the year. And he's like, no, well, and credit to Marshawn. I mean, he's a monster, right? So we're like, assume that guy's gonna be pretty good. We get to the end of it, and we're joking back and forth. He goes, like four people are gonna beat me. I'm gonna be fifth. I'm like, nah. I go, I'll take the under on that. I go, there's no way. I don't think so. Not after what I just saw. And so Liam Bell, right, monster, throws down 22-2. I'm like, okay, well that's one. But then I forget who the swimmer was. And it's bad on my part, but it was like one other guy outsplit him or tied him. Sorry, tied him. Like
okay.
At the exact same time. So he's tied for second fastest split on the year.
Wow.
All right, like let's go get some hibachi and like let's get ready to go for tomorrow. And, so then the next day, and like we're feeling really good about it. He wins his heat of the 2 IM. And it's like, okay, like best time, conference record, gets under 143, best time. Like, wow, like really good. And the first thing he says, like, I won my heat. He's like, I've never won my heat here.
That's good.
I'm like, that's awesome. Win the heat.
It's a great sign.
Oh, it's great. And he's like, okay, so we win the heat. And, he just wanted to beat the guy from the other side of the pool. But, you get to the end of the session, and it's like, yeah, he moved up 10 spots, and that's great. But he had the fastest breaststroke split in the field, in the whole field. And so I was like, okay, so it's like these little carrots, and it's like, what makes it like, it's like these little things along the way. It's like, well, only one guy.
What was his split in the IM?
28, like 3 or something like that. Like moving and moving. And so we get to the night. The event ends, and Emily and I are all looking at it. We're like, yeah, he's still got the fastest breaststroke split even from finals. I mean, now granted, those other guys were on fire too, but
right, yeah,
but like he's got the fastest breaststroke split in the field. So Like, I gotta believe he can finish, right? Like, we're like, we gotta believe he's gonna go. Like, his breaststroke's in the right space,
Right.
And then, I mean, you saw it. The next morning he goes 50.9. And we're like, okay. Like, and it wasn't just like he got there. He like shot himself into the conversation.
Punished himself in there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm telling you, like, and the thing that stuck out for me in the morning was like he was 37-0 in the morning, and I'm like, it's pretty good. At night, and we've been talking about it all year, just like being comfortable in tight margins, like just being comfortable with the fact that, like, because for him, a lot of the times when he races breaststroke, he's usually ahead of people, right? Very, very few times is he ever like up against the pressure when it comes to the 100 breaststroke.
Chasing something, like having to chase like a Liam Bell, for example.
Exactly. And, so like we talked about that all year, building towards that. And, I think he just nailed it, right? Like he didn't panic when everybody was together at the 100 or at the 50. He didn't panic when it was a tight race at 75. And I'm telling you, it was like a dart shooting at the bullseye coming off the last 25. Because he was 36.8, and I'm like, oh my God.
Right. Gotta go. We gotta go.
And so I mean, credit to him. And then obviously, like, qualifying in the 200 breaststroke was amazing, and just getting a second swim there, and it was amazing. So I know probably a long answer, but it was like a movie.
No, it's good. And let me, so like in your role, because I was asking him how he was kind of going through the meet in a different environment, like, he's alone, he's not with his teammates, it's not the whole team there, and he's having to train alone leading up to it when everyone's on spring break. And so what was, like, as a coach, what was your responsibility when you were at specifically at the meet with him, even from travel to the time where you're on the pool deck, you're getting ready for the race? Like, what kind of little bits of advice, and like how are you kind of trying to motivate him, recognizing like no one else is really around? Yeah, you got your parents and some other people supporting you.
I've been wondering what he said. I know he probably got some Tonyisms or whatever he calls.
Well, he said one of your favorite things to say is it's just a numbers game.
Yeah, it's just a number game, man. It's just a numbers game. Crazier things have happened. Yeah. It's like it's math, right? Like you do it, you put yourself in the best position.
He did say though, like definitely like dialing in the pace work before the races was huge for him. You kind of like hyping him up and knowing that he was dialed in, he was looking good, because he also said he was like, I was doubting the taper a little bit getting in, because I think it's also just it's different. Like he was like saying, it's like you're training alone. He's like, the first week was okay training alone, but like second week was rough. Like I was like trying to just get through, see the end goal, and so just it's different, right? So
I would say, like, the biggest thing, like I said, we did differently this year was like I felt like for him, I had to take more, I won't say control, probably ownership. Like I just had to take a little bit more ownership over what he was doing to end his sessions. Like, so like in the morning, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday morning, Monday was in the afternoon. I really took complete ownership of like, hey, this is what this needs to look like, and this is how it's going to end, and this is what I want you to do. And then, like I said, like at night, I would give him the opportunity to do more of what he felt he wanted for his race specific stuff. But I would say, hey, this is how it ends. And I think by doing that and giving him concrete direction of where it needed to be, I would say the morning workouts where I had more ownership of those, I think it just kept him on a timeline, right? Mm-hmm. And it kept him on a rhythm, which I think was valuable, which I think was something we learned from last year to this year, which was going to be important for him. And then with the other pieces, it was more about like, hey, warm up to hit these benchmarks. I trust you to do what you need to do. You have done this at a high level, and we do a lot of things that I don't want to say are repetitive, but we do a lot of things that we call them like tools, right? Like there's a lot of things we work out when we do meet prep and things like that, like they're tools. And, you may like 3 of the 4 things that we do, or you might like 2 of them, or you know what I mean? Like, and that's okay. But like, if we give you 5 different things that we think will work for you, I don't have an ego where it's like, if you like number 1, number 3, and number 5, that's great. Like if you don't like 2 and 4, that's fine. But just know that this is what you should be doing to do these objectives at the end. And I think it just really kept him on a rhythm, because then like he would get in, he would do what he wanted to, like what he felt he needed at night or at prelims. And I would just say, hey, you have to end with this. And by ending with those things, it gave him, I think, a more purposeful warm up where he could hit those benchmarks and feel a lot of confidence into what he needed to do. And it hit, you know. And I think the other big thing that we've really worked on is like, you know, trust your training. Like, not that you can't warm up too much, but I was like, you know, that's why we do all these things. It's so that, like, you know, you can be warmed up to do these things. And we talk about, I'll go, Brian, you got a big motor, man. You know, you can't just go from like 0 to 100. Like, if that motor doesn't warm up first, it's kind of like, it's too drastic a shift.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, so we really were more mindful and conscious with our warm-ups, and like just more confident that we were prepared to go fast when we needed to go fast. But then, yeah, outside of that, it's just like keep things light, you know, like we keep it light. Like it's, you know, like we talked a lot about like, hey, like if you really believe that you can achieve these type of times, it's like crazier things have happened. Like, right? Like if you really
right
at that time, like why I go if it's one more tenth to be like the person, like you're not gonna find the 10th. You're gonna find the 10th. Like what are we talking about? Of course you're gonna find it. You know, so it was super exciting. And it was funny, like he asked me after he got second in the 100 breaststroke. I was like, yeah, tell your parents to come to dinner with us. Like, this is awesome. Like, they got to come share this. Like, this is great. And he goes, where are we going? I go, the same place we went the night before. Don't change your socks.
I love
keep
that.
it light.
I love it. No, it's great. I mean, he definitely touched on like how important, you know, finding a solid routine was for him. Like just dialing in, you know, the same warm up that he felt comfortable with and that he felt strongly about. And, you know, even just like his sleep, you know, he had his whoop strap that kind of like tracked his sleep. And so he was like, it was great. He was like, somehow or another, he's like, I wasn't having that great of rest, like leading up, like, you know, the way I wanted to, but like right when I needed to race, like my, you know, sleep score was at an 85%. And I was like, that's great. So it seems like he was big on routine and knowing like, okay, you know, what's, you know, it's not broken, you know, we're not going to try and fix that. So it's like, definitely adds up with what you two are saying.
Cool. No, yeah, he was great. So
yeah. Awesome. Good. All right. So moving away from NCAAs, obviously, you know, just huge meet, huge success, kind of the cherry on top to the season. But, you know, I'm sure it was like you don't even have enough time to like process, you know, the conference championship, because you're kind of like, as coaches, we're always moving from one thing to the next. And as far as like the season, and sometimes it's hard to even like sit and just process what we've like witnessed and like what our team has accomplished. So moving back to like conference championships at CAAs, I mean, both your men and women did amazing. I was looking at some of the results, and, you know, you had people like, obviously, you know, Brian, but I was even looking at some of the women like Allie and Maddie and Addie, and like, they're just crushing it. They're going crazy fast times. And so talk to me about that meet from, you know, where the season started to like wrapping it up at conference championships. It's a fast conference. It's competitive. And just what was that like? And what were some highlights for you as a coach and the coaching staff?
Yeah, no, I think we had a great conference championship. I think, you know, everything comes back to trying to build good culture, right? And like, so this is second year, you know, so me, Emily, Matt Bossy, you know, had Pat Boyle last year. This year we got Susie Cadigan. You know, Yvonne Rodriguez has been around the program for years, working with our strength coaches in dryland. And then obviously Bill Williams, new on the diving side. You know, anytime you start over, new coaching staff, there's going to be some challenges. You know, I would say last year we were trying to get a lot of systems in place, you know, and just kind of like the way we like to do things, the way we want to promote team culture and environment. A lot of that stuff we started, and I think we really took another step with that stuff this year. And that ultimately, I think, led to making a huge difference throughout the season. You know, it's our job as coaches to explain things for sure. Like, absolutely. Like, it's teaching. Coaching is teaching. But I think what happened was from year one to year two, they understand us a little bit better and we understand them a little bit better. And it just makes us flow a lot easier, like at the conference championship. Like it's the little things that we do, like how we warm up, what are our expectations for warm down and things like that. We're not over coaching the basic stuff anymore. Like the little things that are the expectations just become a lot easier. And it makes everything else flow a lot easier. I think for where we were last year to where we are this year in terms of the measurables and our workouts and our checkpoints and things like that, like we kept beating all those marks and getting a ton of buy-in. I mean, we had some really, really good first years this year too. I mean, like Addie Scott was a monster. I mean, she totally lit it up. Maddie Frick winning the 4 a.m. might have been one of the crazy highlights of the meet, because she was funny because the night before we're at dinner and she's like, not like doubting herself, but it's a senior and it's coming to the end and like we've done a lot of hard work, and like she was funny. She goes, I don't know what happens tomorrow, kind of thing. Like what happens if it doesn't go right? And I well, what happens if it goes really well? What do you mean? Like, what happens if it goes really well? Like,
right? Yeah.
What do we do then?
Look at the other side. Yeah.
Yeah. She's like, well, that would be really exciting. I'm like, yeah, it would be really exciting. It'd be really cool. I'm like, why not? Like, why wouldn't it go really well?
Right.
She's like, yeah, because it was funny because like probably a month before I was like, all right, we're gonna go 300-400 IMs, lot of rest, send 1 to 3, and she's like, can we just do one fast one? I'm like, no, we gotta do 3. Like we're doing 3. Like we're doing 3.
Yeah.
And it was just awesome to see that like kind of pay off. It's really cool to see a senior at the end like have some crazy achievements.
For sure. And real quick, I meant to go back to it, but like talking about going back to like the just the team cultural piece. Like second year, and like you said, it takes a little bit of time to build that trust and that sort of connection with the swimmers and the coaches to be able to kind of be one collective unit. And so talk to me about like things that you're looking for when you're trying to build that team culture, because obviously you had the experience of being at Fairfield as a head coach, and it's not your first time around the block, and so it's like what are you looking for, like as far as just building the right team culture, like certain mantras for your team or commitments, or even just like the coaches around you, like how are you, what's the process like for that?
Yeah, I think one thing I learned from my Fairfield experience probably till now and the different places I've been, I think my own life experiences have probably made me become like more patient in a good way. Right. I have my own kids now. I have a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And I recognize, okay, that's somebody else's kid. Right. So like, it makes it easier to kind of have perspective and be like, a little bit more patient, a little bit more understanding. I think for me, which I try to, remind the team all the time, like I will do anything for you and your goals as long as you're being like honest with what you're trying to do, so it's like, like, coach, I'm going to be a medalist next year at the conference meet. Awesome. So are you going to train here this summer? Well, like, I'm not sure I'm going to have enough time to train this summer. I'm like, okay, well, that's okay. But I think we really need to talk about like those type of goals or just re-examine what we're thinking about. You know what I mean? Or like, hey, I want to make a US Open cut this year. Great. What are we going to do this spring? Are you going to do the 8 hours, or are you going to, hey, are you going to do some voluntary workouts so that we make sure that we're building towards that this summer, so that we make sure we get that cut this summer, or whatever that looks like. Hey, are you going to make sure you're following your team builder app and you're going to get all your weight sessions in? And I think for young people now, it's just having those conversations and not coming at it from a negative approach of like, if you don't do this, you're bad and you're never going to be successful. It's just more like, hey, and I think that's the things where, kind of going back to Brian a little bit, or other people we've had in the program that have been really successful. It's like, let's have an honest conversation about what it looks like to do the things you want to do. Like, like last year, it's like, all right, these are the long course practices. These are the meets we're going to go to. This is the plan. With my experience tells me will set you up to be the most successful this summer to make Olympic trials. Okay, let's do it. Hey, if we're going to achieve getting the top 8 in the 100 breaststroke this year, these are the things that, my experience tells me are what's going to put us in the best position to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Deviating from that opens us up to like, maybe we're not going to be where we want to be. So why don't we follow the path? Because I think as long as we're communicating, it's a partnership. But if we outline a plan and people want to deviate from the plan, like if we're not having an honest conversation about making adjustments, you're doing your thing and we're trying to get you to do one thing, and it's not going to click. It's not going to get you where you want to be. If that makes sense.
And that makes total sense. And so, like, how do you implement that then? Do you kind of, say to your team, look, we're going to do goal meetings. We're going to meet and we're going to do this like throughout, maybe throughout the season, or do you just kind of go up to them? Like, how do you kind of set that up?
Yeah. So we certainly have check-ins at different points. I probably spend more time in meetings with student athletes than anything else that I do. Don't tell my bosses that. I probably got to turn in some paperwork or something, but joking. But that's my favorite part of what we do, right? Is building relationships with team members. Usually it trickles down from hey, we're going to have a meeting and I'll go over things from 10,000 feet and I'll encourage people to come in and we'll talk about it. I'm going through that, now coming back from NC2As. I mean, that was one of the biggest challenges. Like we came back and started our 8 hours of training, and then, but I was gone for the first week. I was gone for good reason, but, feeling like we're catching back up. And then again, culture and honesty. Like I came back in the first meeting, like I think people were not surprised that I was back on Monday, but I was back. And I just said, hey, Coach Matt and Coach M are going to, run a little bit more of the practices, especially this first half of the week. I will be in my office from 9 to 5, basically every day. I will be here doing stuff. If you need to meet with me, let's meet with me. But to be honest, I gotta be dad a little bit more this week. I gotta make sure I take my kids to school. My wife's been carrying the burden. And I want to pick my kids up from school because they haven't seen me for this, last week. And I'd like to be more involved with that. So I am here for you. It just may look a little different at practice this week. And I think, honestly, if you just tell them the truth with that stuff, my team's great. I think they get that. My kids come to the meet, they show up, they cheer on the Tigers. My kids couldn't be more happy to be there cheering, throwing the ball up. But, it's just honest. It's I'll be here if you need me, and I'm happy to keep those meetings going. Just know, hey, I got to be dad. And I think they appreciate that. But yeah, so it's a lot more individual meetings. It's a lot more we're in our groups and training in different training groups. When I run some of the groups that I coach, I'll just tell them right at the front of practice, hey, this is what we're doing today. This is the goal at the end of the sets. This is what we're trying to do. Questions, great. Let's go.
Yeah.
Or whatever. We outline for them what our block weeks kind of look like. So they don't know what the workout is all the time, but they know the focus of the workout generally in our flow of the week. So I think that's important for communication. And then, just talking to people when we're going to make adjustments. I make sure one thing is important. If we're doing something in the lineup that's not normal for somebody or not their primary comfort zone, I always make sure I pull that person aside and say, hey, just so you know, this is what I'm thinking for the lineup, which really means this is what we're doing in the lineup. but
so hear me out. I'm thinking.
Yeah, this is what I'm thinking. You're going to send the 5 for 8. And they're okay.
No choice. So.
No choice. Yeah, we got to do it.
So, all right. I love that. Walk me through a training week, including sort of, you talked about the swimmers don't always know obviously what the details of the workout are going to be. They'll know the idea based on what you've kind of laid out. So kind of, what does a training week, maybe mid kind of season away from taper time, obviously, look like for your group? when you guys are, on campus and adding in strength and conditioning workouts and all that?
Yeah. So, I mean, our normal week is obviously Monday through Saturday, and we blend it. I mean, here at Towson, we have an 8-lane pool, not a separate dive well. So, we have to be a little creative at times. And, what we do is some days we go men and women together. Some days we go everybody together. And other days we're in our groups. So how it works is on Mondays and Fridays, we go men and women separate. Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're in our groups. Wednesdays in the middle of the week, we put everybody all together. And that's like a big get off the block and sprint day and racing. And, we even think for some of our longer event people that just getting up and kind of focusing on racing helps them get more comfortable with racing and helps build some front end speed. So we think it's valuable, and it also gives everybody an opportunity to kind of cheer their teammates on and just get used to being as a big group. In our primary group days, sprinters are doing their sprint stuff, strokers are doing their thing, distance people are doing their thing. And we blend it together. We put like our male breaststrokers with our female backstroke and flyers. They kind of have a group doing different things. And then we have our distance people are obviously doing their thing and so on and so forth. Mondays, usually we go heavy 200 free level swimming or IM. So, that's when Brian gets run through the regular on the IM and stuff like that. And it's
he talked about that. He was like, yeah, one thing that absolutely destroys me is IM. He was like, training for IM. He was like, I don't typically fail workouts. I think he mentioned that. He was like, one thing that was different this year was like up until my senior year, I hadn't really failed a workout. And then, me and coach, Tony are there doing an IM set in the middle of the winter, and I fail it. I completely fail it. And he's like, but that helped. That helped me realize, okay, I can fail a set. That's okay. As long as I, gain some resilience from that to be able to go forward and try and challenge myself even more. So anyways, it was fun.
Yeah, no. And I think it's okay to hit the speed bump. I think as long as you recognize that, if anything, I think it helps us recognize that they're people too. When you put people in positions, because we forget when these guys achieve at such a high level, you start to forget that they're still people,
right?
And anything could throw the day off. You know what I mean? It could be whatever. It could be up all night studying for the paper. It's like, what do you mean? This guy should be great, or
you should have that. You should have that figured out because you got to be here to do the thing.
Got to be here. Yeah. So it's they're people. I think sometimes we forget that they're people, and you got it. But so we'll have the IM, we'll have the 200 free stuff. It's always funny because when the men and women are separate, it's the men are always, oh, what did the women do? And what is it hard? I'm like, yeah, of course it's hard. But the women are always like, yeah, we did it. What's the problem?
Yeah. Right.
But Fridays we'll go men and women separate, depending on what we've got cooking. It might be a meat prep day or something like that. We call it kind of a wild card, depending on if there's something in training we feel we need to do, we'll throw it in that day. Saturdays we go back to our groups, usually more stroke oriented, depending on who you are and what you swim. And that's kind of the typical flow. The big thing we talk about as a program is if we're going to be successful at the conference championship level, you have to be able to do 3 events at a high level and score in 3 events at the conference level. So we put a big emphasis on, making sure we touch all the areas we need to be good at so that we can compete really well at the end.
Right. Totally. Yeah. No, that's great. I love it. And so you find that keeping your men and women together for some days, but then also separating them on other days is really helpful, right?
Super valuable. I think one of the things we found when I got here was in the COVID world, they really went men and women separate, which makes sense, right? With COVID, it was the easiest way to kind of, I've got one group this size, one group this size. It's the best way to kind of keep it
manageable. Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing we wanted was to really try to bring the group closer together. And we're constantly looking to evolve our training groups and things like that. But because it's got to make sense, right? At the end of the day, if it doesn't make sense that they're getting what they need, then like, it's not going to be beneficial. But
For sure.
I don't think it's a bad thing to get them together a couple times a week to make sure they know what's going on. Like, I think it's valuable. So then like you can look over at a dual meet and be like, oh, that's Addie Scott. She swims freestyle. Oh wait, yeah, she beat me the other day. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's valuable. I think it's super valuable. So anything we can do to keep building culture, because it's an individual sport in a team format, right?
Right. That's the beauty in it. Yeah, for sure.
So anything you can do to create the team aspect of it, I think is huge.
For sure. No, I love that you're touching on it, because the more I listen to coaches talk and do research on my own and just like observe while I'm coaching, it's just like, yeah, it's so important to try to involve, the greater picture of like, this is about us. It's not just about you. It's your performance. It's you, getting up on those blocks and doing what you're going to do. But, there's a greater picture here. So I think it's great. And so take me back in time a little bit. So starting from, your journey into swimming, in Connecticut, and then just moving on to Springfield, having the success you did there, and then transitioning to coaching. Kind of walk me through how you found swimming, and then eventually how you got into coaching, and maybe who inspired you to do it.
Oh, wow. Hopefully I don't jump around too much on this one. Well, so we lived in Connecticut. We moved to New Hampshire for a couple of years. Not a lot of crazy swimming in New Hampshire. Like, I was like up in the White Mountains. We moved back to Connecticut in like 4th grade. And, I moved back, I think in like February, like second half of the year after the holidays kind of thing. And so like starting 4th grade, in the middle of 4th grade. And then it was like, what do I get into? And I knew how to swim, but I didn't really know like what was going on. And they put me in like the Park and Rec Summer Swim League thing, like back in Southbury, Connecticut, the Southbury Sharks, baby. And I was like old at that point, right? For swimming, I was like a 10 and under, and like my first friend when I got there was this kid Matt Rush, and Matt Rush, is a swimmer, right? But he had been doing it for longer, big time, 10 years old, he'd been doing it, right? And I was like, I want to swim. My parents were like, okay. So like did the summer league thing, and like I was the kid showing up in the swim trunks, and everybody else had like this, like the jammers and stuff. Like, I'm showing up in like the trunks, like, what is this guy doing? And it was awesome. Like, I loved it. I fell in love with it. Like, the coaches were great, and it's like your classic, like, well, anybody falls in love with it. It's like, it's like college kids or like high school kids, like coaching like little kids, and like the energy and the fun that those guys have, like, and then like you get to that point, right? Like, you become the college kid coaching, like, the 10-year-olds, like, it's
right.
Just like, it's just fun.
It's just exciting. Yeah, it's so exciting, especially at that age. You're just like, you're just having fun.
Oh, it was incredible. So like I do that, and then I'm like, I guess I could be kind of good at this. And, so my friend from that, Matt Rush, he swam on the winter team, the winter Park and Rec team, which was the more serious version of what we were doing. And I was like, Mom, can I do that? And yeah. And then like, I just kept getting better. And, I swam for Pomperaug High School in Connecticut. He's got a coach who's been there now for like, I don't even know, like 30 years now. Fran's probably been there. They've won, maybe 20 state championships now, and like phenomenal program out of Connecticut. And just like, again, culture, team, like, and especially as like a teenage kid, like, that's all you want. Like, you want to be a part of something, right? So like, from the Sharks to the Pomperaug High School, one of the best teams in the state, it was just a great experience. And, really fortunately, like, again, I wasn't doing much. And then one day I was all state. One day I was one of the top 10 guys out of Connecticut. And like, it's funny with the UMass shirt. Like, I got recruited to UMass. I got recruited to UConn, Rhode Island when they had a men's team. So like, I thought I was pretty good, right? Like, one day I was, just kind of doing it. And then the next, I was one of the top guys in the state of Connecticut. And,
Wow.
And it kind of was like, whoa, like, because I had been late to everything in that aspect, right? Like, my parents, my dad was into like baseball, like, he would always ask me, like, did you win? Like, it was never like, fine. Like, it was just like, hey, did you win? I'm like, yeah, I won, but my time wasn't good, or it wasn't as good as it's bad. And he was like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, you won. Like, what do we
That's the best, right? The parents who don't know much about the sport of swimming, and they're like, wait, so you did great, right? You won. It's like, no, I didn't do that good. I was 5 seconds off my time. And it's like, no, but you were great. It's like,
yeah, but you were great, right? And I was like, oh yeah, I guess, yeah. And
sure, it was fine.
so I looked at all those big Division I schools in Connecticut, in the Northeast, like even New Hampshire when they had a men's team. My dad was a University of New Hampshire alum, so
wow.
So I was really fortunate, and but my dad had been a teacher for 37 years, something like that, and it was like, I kind of wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I kind of wanted to do PE, and like, again, like I had these other options, but some of these big state schools, it wasn't necessarily like physical education. It might have been like kinesiology and something different, which now in retrospect it wouldn't change anything, I guess, but so then it was like Springfield College was on the radar because like that was the PE school. And obviously Southern Connecticut State was kind of like, hey, if I don't go to these schools, this was another great in-state option here in Connecticut. And anyway, went to Springfield College. One of my closest friends in the world, Tom, his older brother was there. I'll give it a shot. And like all these PE teachers had gone there. And like, yeah, it totally makes sense. And totally fell in love with it. John Tate, who just retired, recently, officially.
Last year. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I just felt like when I was on my trip, I was like, no matter what happens, which was kind of like my high school, I was like, this guy will have my back. Like, like no matter what we're doing, like he just seemed like such a great person. He seemed like he cared so much about the team. Yeah. And I was like, that's what I'm looking for, because like when things are good, it's always good. But if things ever go sideways, you want to make sure that your relationship is more than just going up and down the pool, right?
Right. Performance based, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and he was just so good, and I fell in love with it, and it just became a really special place, and I loved my Springfield experience, and it was one of those things where it's like, I certainly had some other options, but I was like, it could be cool to be like a part of going to Division III NC2As and things like that. And I loved it.
And talk to me about just some of the highlights of like the experience and going to NC2As and being with the Springfield, team. Like, what were some highlights from that when you look back on it?
Well, I mean, like I was there at a pretty cool time. Like the MIT program was on the up and up. So it was super competitive, and Coast Guard was at, a really high point too. Springfield obviously had a rich history. I was swimming at the time with a guy named Roy Birch, who was an Olympian, and he was 22nd in the world at the time in the long course 50-meter free. So it's like you're in that environment, and you're like, you just kind of pick up on different traits and aspects and what people are doing. It was a great experience, and like, coming in from a Springfield, like you're kind of, I want to say you're always the underdog because the program's had a lot of success, but there was moments like, I remember John being like, hey, how would you guys feel about racing Boston College? And we're like, oh, Division I Boston College? Yeah, let's do it. And we took him down to the last two events my senior year, but he was asking, but he was really like, by the way, you're racing Boston College. So it's like, all right, cool. Like experiences like that, like not being afraid. Like John was such a great coach about, Brian talking about, failing in a workout. It's like John was the king of that, like in a good way. He'd be like, we are going to push you all to the max, and you're going to have to accept that sometimes it doesn't go well. But if you're willing to understand it and work through the challenges, when you do it again, like find a way to be better. We used to do the set, it's like, you would just, a million versions of it, but he would take a second off every 100. He started at like 140, like you have to fail. Like no one wins. You cannot win as it just goes. Like, but like winning can come in a lot of different forms though. Like maybe this time you finally get under a minute, and like by the time I was a senior, I would be like one of the last two guys at the end, but I remember as a freshman, like, being out at like halfway point, I'm like, oh, that sucks. Like that's not good. Like that's not good.
That's bad.
I remember as a senior being like motivated to do that. Like we do it like twice a year, but I'd be motivated to be like, yeah, I want to be the guy. Like, I'm not going to be like one of these guys who's like, I'm like Final Four. Like, no, I want to be in the finals. Like, I want to get down to the end. So anyway, like we would do things like that. We always challenged like big NESCAC teams. We tied NYU, who just had a phenomenal NC2As. Like we would always race the toughest teams in New England. And I so appreciated that part of the experience that like we never shied away from anybody just to pad the record. Like we went after everybody, and it was great. And we had great people to do that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so, all right, moving on from Springfield there, like what was the motivation to just kind of get, or like what was the thought behind, okay, let me transition into coaching? It seems like John could have been a big influence for you, but
100%. It's funny. It's like my dad was like, so it got actually to my halfway through my junior year at Springfield, I was like, you know what? I think I can coach. And it was hilarious because my dad, I called my dad. I was like, I think I'm going to coach. I don't think I'm going to do student teaching. I think I'm going to pick up a business minor. Like maybe I'll own a club team. Maybe it'll help me be a better administrator, whatever. Like I was like, I think I want to coach. My dad's like, yeah, he's like, coach the high school team. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what does that even mean? Yeah. Because like he had been a teacher for like 37 years or whatever. And he was like, he coached like the golf team and ski team and all that. He was like, what do you mean? Like he had coached for however many years. And I'm like, this is like the simplicity of how like you like when you're like, when you're like a college young person. I was like, I referred to my club coach, Sean from Cheshire YMCA, who's a phenomenal coach. I think one of the best coaches in the country. And I said, Sean has a boat and a family. Like I could totally do that. Right? Like when you're 20 years old, you're like, what else do I need? A boat and a family. And like they coach swimming, they have a boat and a family. John seems like a happy guy too. Like I could totally do that. Yeah. And my dad was like, could you like think about this a little bit more besides that? And I was like, yeah. So anyway, like met with my academic advisor, like changed some things, ended up completing a business minor in 3 semesters and like, just changed things up a little bit. And, it really did start my journey. I was out in Chicago for a brief period of time and then started interviewing to all kinds of places. And I got hired at Gulliver Prep down in Miami, Florida, as an assistant coach down there and assistant aquatics director at like 23. I was going to set the world on fire, and it was a great experience and invaluable experience. But I think at that point in my life, I was still just kind of missing something in the Northeast. Not that I'm not flexible now in my life to like get out of that comfort zone more, but at the time at 23, like it was a grind and it was certainly good and it was a valuable experience. But I think I wanted to be more at the college level. And while I enjoyed that experience at Gulliver and the people were great, I felt like the college experience was a little bit more where I needed to be. And then I ended up at Wesleyan University. Mary Bullock hired me. She's now like an assistant athletic director at Penn State. But she was amazing. She was the first person to hire me at the college level. And she was tough, but she was so fair. And like, it was all the little things that she tried to do to mentor me to make me better and just be like, hey, if you're serious about this, like you need to be on point with certain items. And I'll never forget it. And I tell people all the time, like she drove me to like a Staples, like an Office Depot or Staples or whatever. Yeah. Like, here's a planner. Like, get things in order. Like immediately. Like, and I'm like 20 again, I'm like 23 years old. I'm gonna set the world on fire. It's like, and then you do this job long enough now, and like having been a head coach now for 7 years, you're like, okay, guy, like be on top of this stuff. So that was great. And then it was a weird experience because Mary obviously ended up going to Penn State, which is a great move for her and what she wanted to do. I'm forever thankful for Mary Bullock for hiring me, giving some guy from Pomperaug High School a shot. Like that was amazing. Yeah. And I got to work with Frank Keith, who passed away last year, Olympic coach, Yale coach for however many years. He came and he was the interim head coach at Wesleyan for a year. Because it's funny, again, I was like, Mary Lee's, I'm like, am I going to be the interim head coach? Like, of course you're not going to be the interim head coach. We're going to bring Frank in, And Frank was like, he couldn't have been more generous with his time. it was actually amazing because I saw Eddie Reese at NC2As this week. You know, it's like not that I know Eddie Reese or anything, but he was sitting there for a second. I said, "Hey, I want you to know, for what it's worth, like I worked with Frank Keefe. You know, I was his last assistant coach, which I guess makes me like the last Jedi, right?" And I was like, you know, like, hey, I was his last assistant coach when he was the interim head coach at Wesleyan for a year. He just always spoke so highly of you and your program and what you all are doing. Because like they had been on different like guys of the same age, right? They had been on different paths, but certainly coaching at a high level. You know, he said some nice things about Frank, which I really appreciated. You know, in that short interaction. But you know, Frank could have been more generous with his time. He had no reason to be so generous with his time, but he was. You know, and I actually had a chance to talk to Frank right last year when Brian qualified. And I was like, you know, Frank, like I did it. You know, we got a guy.
We got the guy.
He was like, that's awesome. And it was good to talk to him one last time. He ended up actually passing not too long after that. But he, you know, in the most frank way possible, he was like, I'm going to get down there this fall and see if you guys have what it takes. And I was like, I can't wait for it. Bring the cheesesteaks. I'm in. But, you know, we missed Frank. And then obviously Peter Solomon at Wesleyan couldn't have been a better mentor, just in terms of leadership style and how to get things done, what's important, what's not important, where to put your energy into. Like Peter was great. Still close to him. And then, you know, it rolled into Iona College, and Nick Cavatero plays a huge part of my success, and all the things he did for me and giving me the chance to make mistakes, which I'm sure I made plenty. And then, you know, and then Fairfield U was an amazing opportunity. You know, first time head coach there, 5 years, 3 championships with the women. You know, finally got the men over the hump, which was great. Got into second when they were last, and then. You know, now it's been here for 2 years. I'm sure there's a lot of things in between, but
for sure. No, it's a great journey though, and certainly like you said, countless names to mention who you've like really learned a lot from. When you look back, like especially at those years at Fairfield, just because obviously that was the big, you know, first head coaching experience, and you had, like you said, great success with the women and the men. What are kind of like some moments within there that you're the most proud of? As far as like your time at Fairfield and what you were able to accomplish with them, like when you look back in retrospect, like, what kind of shines as like proud moments for you?
Well, I think the cool part at Fairfield was because of the state that the program had been in for so long. So many things became like first time ever milestones, and like you can never replicate being first, right? Like first is first. The first person to ever is great. Everybody else is the next person. Like, right? Like, so winning the first women's championship was a big deal. I thought that was wild. You know, obviously we went on to win 3 in a row. Incredible. You know, winning the events that we won, like it was the first team. It broke the 10-year winning streak at Marist. Like that was a big deal. Like they hadn't lost a dual meet. We beat them for the first time. That was their first dual meet they had lost in 10 years. Like first time a team from Fairfield had beaten Marist. Like, you know, like the women countless, like most dual meet wins in a season, things like that. Conference record, you know, Morgan Hansen. We had 3 different swimmers achieve swimmer of the year, which was like 3 different women on the team at the same time, because they would have different years each year, and like we had 3 different women at one point at the swimmer of the year on the current team, which was crazy.
That's amazing.
That was crazy. And that, you know, on the men, it was like, again, same thing, beating conference rivals, like beat Marist for the first time at home. That was a huge deal for them. You know, having a guy win a conference title for the first time was a huge achievement. Having a relay win for the first time was like that might have been, even though it was my last year with the men's team, we had the most conference champions on the men's side, even though we didn't win, but we had like the most conference titles, which weren't quite deep enough to get over the hump. Sure. But winning a relay the first night with the men, it was just such an electric moment, because like we had done it so much with the women,
right?
To get the guys just to finally do it, and it was like, it just meant so much to them. It meant so much to me, because like our journey had been tough because the women had been so successful. And the guys just like, we went for 3 years, we couldn't do it. Then we had COVID, and then we came out like roaring, my 5th year. It was such a cool feeling to see like the work pay off. So I think that's where it's like really valuable. Like it was just such a valuable experience about culture, team, and ultimately patience, right? Because like we weren't, like patience wasn't always my strong suit back then. So I think like understanding that things take time. I'm in a much better place for that today.
For sure. Yeah. All right. Last couple questions here.
Sure.
Kind of preview what's ahead. I mean, for, again, second year at Towson, and obviously there's hopefully many more years to come, like as head coach here. So, what do you guys have lying ahead, heading into the Olympic year? Will you kind of be training any athletes for OTs or any international swimmers, and then even beyond, like as far as just goals for you as a team, as a program?
Yeah, no. So again, measure everything, first time this, first time that, successes, measure everything, because like even on the years when you think things could have gone better, there's always something you can point to that's super positive. This year, what are we doing? Well, one cool thing we come out of the year, the new U.S. Open cuts have dropped for next year. We got 7 guys qualified for the U.S. Open, and we've got women qualified, and we got a lot of women right on the bubble. So we're always setting new goals to give the team something to work for. Like it's hard to swim in the summer, especially at the college level if you're not working towards something. So we talk about in the context, hey, if we have more people going to U.S. Open, like we're going to go as a team. It's going to be a great experience. Like, so why not train this summer to try to hit some more goals and do some other things? So we got 7 guys qualified for that, which are super excited to keep training. We're going to be going down to Swim Atlanta for the Swim Atlanta Classic in about 7 weeks on the calendar here.
Nice.
Obviously, Brian's already qualified for OTs, but we've got 3 other guys that are on the bubble that we think can make a run at the cuts, who are also already qualified for Summer Nationals. So we're going to go to Atlanta. Obviously, Brian's got a big meet at Olympic Trials where we think he could be pretty special one more time for the big guy. And then, we've got some regional meets up here, whether we go to Futures, and then we've got 2 guys right now qualified to go out to Summer Nationals in Irvine, and they're fired up for that. Again, it's new challenges, opportunity to be on the deck with some of the big boys, get to see some different things, which I think is really exciting. So,
for sure.
And then going into next year, hey, we just need more people to try to score in 3 events and do it at a high level. But I think we're building towards that, so we're on our way.
For sure. No, that's great. As far as like the recruiting approach for you and your coaches, like, again, you're building, you're trying to build something, obviously, and it's already a great foundation, but what are you kind of looking for is basically, what I'm getting to when it comes to the recruiting at Towson.
People that are excited to be a part of our program. I think if you're excited to be a part of the Towson community or whatever group you're joining, if you're excited to be a part of that community, you're going to put your heart into it. You're going to lean in and you're going to do the hard work, and you'll make some sacrifices. We want people that want to be here and want to be a part of our community, because it's an awesome community. I think the Towson community is one of the reasons that drew me here, right? Like I think the people are great. I think the location is great. Academically, it's only going on the up and up. Like our new president does a phenomenal job. We have a new athletic director who came from the Power 5, so I think he gets it, and he's willing to be creative to support the program. And I'm super fortunate because they've been very supportive of what we're doing. As long as it makes sense and we can communicate what we're trying to do, our athletic department has been phenomenal with where we're trying to go as a team. So I'm super fortunate.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, final question here. As far as get out swims, are you a fan of get out swims as a coach? And if so, do you have any standout get out swims from your time, either as a swimmer or a coach?
So we had one get out swim this year that was an epic failure. so I guess the most recent one that we did was an epic failure. So maybe I don't love them. And so what we did was we took Brian, we took Dan McLaughlin, who's been we went 19-4 this year on a relay, as part of our record-breaking relay. So, I got him, I got Brian, of course, and I like to do them as mixed gender relays. So we did this last year, and we did it this year. So we did like a mixed gender 2 free relay. we had a young woman named Marissa who went 22 for the first time this year on a relay, which was huge. And then we had Janine Murphy, who's been great. Like, she's really risen for us and done a phenomenal job. So we're doing this get out swim, and it's like they probably had to average like 22.7 or something like that. But it's like the two guys on the front are going to go 20 points. So it's like the ladies really, they'll do it. And they go 23 pretty automatic. 1, 2, 3. The splits are crazy. Like, it's like Brian's like 20.2, Dan's like 20.6. This is like peak of training. Marissa goes like 21.2 or 23.2, and we're like, oh my god, Janine Murphy, and she's gonna hate me for saying this. She dives in and her goggles come off, and she stops, and the whole pool's going nuts, and then just so anyway, she comes back out, and I'm like, and I'm hitting the split, so I go, all right, this is where the time stopped. If you can still beat the time when the flats start, I'll give you guys the get out swim. I mean, and she's embarrassed, she's upset. But she does the time. Everybody cheered.
Oh, let's go. But
the fallout from that was like Coach Bossy, Coach Matt was like, I think we gotta force these guys to swim without goggles sometimes. I'm like, we're not doing that. He's like, well, he felt so validated. That like, well, if we practiced that, she wouldn't have stopped. I don't know if that's 100% true, but maybe. Well, he felt so validated by that. I told you so. I'm like, this is not the I told you so moment right now. Okay, so, but it worked out.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Brian shared the exact same story, so it's good.
It was wild. It was like, you guys are kidding me. They were so fast. It was like,
no, the way he described it too was equally as good as you. So it's awesome.
Yeah, it was great.
That's great. Awesome. Well, Tony, thanks for your time. I appreciate it. And yeah, if there's anything else you'd like to add, now's the time, but it's been great.
No, yeah, super appreciative of the opportunity. I love that we're doing this stuff for our sport. It's great to hear from different people. So I love the show. So thank you so much for having me on. And as always, go Tigers.
Let's go. Go Tigers.